What's going on, CDL fans, and welcome back to another episode of Champ Sunday with Jake Maverik. This week, we're going to talk a bit about everything, right? This is finally the end of our first 2 weeks of online qualifiers for Major 1. First 2 weeks of the season, we learned a lot about every single team. Specifically, probably the reason you clicked on this video, because it's the title and thumbnails. We're going to talk about the 7 biggest surprises for me so far this season. But beyond that, we're also going to talk about a couple other things, as well as finish off with the Ask Jake segment as always. So if you guys do enjoy this type of CDL content, make sure to sub. We're going to see if we can hit 7,000 subs before the end of the year, before 2025. We're getting close, so I really appreciate the support on all the things. A quick side note before I even get into the content, feel free to use the timestamps that are linked down below or in the timeline if you want to just fast forward to whatever it is you want to hear. But I do want to say I appreciate the support on all the videos, on these videos, as well as the other videos I made and the watch parties and everything so far. Super dope to see this many people, as passionate about competitive COD as I am. And to have a platform to talk about it with you guys is just really, really something I'm super grateful for. Never thought I would have. So I appreciate all the gas and support I get in my live stream chats, in these comments and everything on Twitter. So thank you guys seriously a ton. I hope you know how grateful and appreciative I am of it. But yeah, let's hop straight in, man. And let's talk about the 7 biggest surprises. Honestly, not really in order to these. Technically, I guess as we go down, the top one is the first one that came to my mind. So this first one maybe is the biggest surprise in my mind. Because like I said, I just wrote these straight down the list in 7 of them. So number 1 for me, though, is the Carolina Royal Ravens. The team as a whole. They're 4-0 to start the season, undefeated. They're 12-4 in map count. They've only lost 4 maps, which is insane. Not only that, they swept Atlanta FaZe. They were the first team to sweep FaZe. I believe it was in sweep FaZe in an online qualifier, maybe was what it said, in like nearly 600 days, which is just absolutely insane. And they were the first team to pull off a reverse sweep versus Cloud9. The Ravens look like potentially the best team in the game. Honestly, if you said Ravens were number 1 in your power rankings right now, I wouldn't even argue with you because they look incredible at pretty much everything there is to play in Call of Duty in competitive COD. Slasher specifically, it looks like he's in prime form again. He literally must have built a time machine and went back like to 7 or 8 years ago and got back in his prime because he has been absolutely slamming. But on top of that, Gwyn has been quite literally superstar level, MVP level. Like if the season was to end right now, I really think Gwyn could win the MVP award. He's on the top of the charts in like every single mode, in every single statistical category. He's doing it all. He's literally doing it all. Sometimes he starts a little slow and then he picks it up. We saw that today with the reverse sweep versus C9, but it's just insane to see how good the Royal Ravens have looked, especially because I think in my preseason power rankings, I had them number 6. So I definitely was a little bit high on them. But then in the coaches poll that came out, they weren't rated very highly. People really didn't think, I think for the most part, that Ravens were going to be this good. Although I think most people probably had them in the top 6 to top 8 range. And I mean, looking at their matches on my second monitor, they obviously 3-1 the Vegas Falcons in their first series, 3-1 the LA Gorilla Mates in their second series, swept FaZe, and then reverse swept Cloud9 New York. So the fact that they're beating some of these teams, I mean, Vegas, obviously, they're in last in the league. LAG are also winless, but they have been pretty competitive in some of their maps. So you've just kind of trolled in some big moments. We're going to talk about them later. Atlanta FaZe is Atlanta FaZe, and then Cloud9 is a team that once they got off of their bad servers have been pretty competitive. So the Ravens, I truly think, is like the real deal, at least in this point in the game. We've seen teams start out really good at the beginning of the year and then drop off as it goes on. So we'll see how they continue to progress. But right now, it feels like they know the game better than any other team. The second surprise for me after these first 2 weeks of matches so far this season is the Boston Breach, another team that truly is just playing better than I think anyone could have expected, especially because of obviously what happened with Boston last year. I mean, they won 6 total matches in all of the CDL last year. They've already won half of that just in the first 2 weeks. They are 3-1 right now heading into the winter break. Of course, one of those came against OpTic Texas. They're 5-3 in Hardpoint and 5-3 in SND. So really good in 4 of the 5 game modes or in 4 of the 5 maps you play in a series, which obviously, I mean, if you're going to be good in anything, being good in Hardpoint and SND seems like what you'd want to be best at. And not to mention their teamwork just looks really, really good. I made a whole video about this, breaking down an SND map they played versus OpTic. If you want to check it out, it's on the channel. But they chow everything together. They play together. Their use of information and search and destroy is so good. It just feels like the fundamentals Boston is playing with are really, really strong. And same thing can be said for Ravens. And I think this bodes well for them going forward because sometimes you'll see teams that like win but sometimes it's just because of an individual player icing up in a big moment, or maybe the other team trolling a lot, or getting a little bit lucky with a spawn or something crazy. But I feel like Ravens and Boston, these first two teams that we're talking about, they've played fundamentally sound COD, and like the reasons they're winning feels like it's in their control, if you know what I mean. So Boston has looked really, really good. And on top of that, to touch on the ice perspective, they have gone game 5 every single series, and they're 3-1 in those. That is already more game 5 wins than they had all of last year. I don't know if you guys remember how many game 5s Boston went to last year. I think they ended the year like 2-12 or 2-14 or something like that in game 5s. They are already 3-1. That is already more wins in game 5s than last year. So this team clearly has what it takes and is knowing the game early on, like I said, for Ravens, and has truly been a surprise to me with just how good they've looked. Now to switch gears slightly for our number 3 surprise on the list, and it is Atlanta FaZe. Obviously, this is a surprise in the opposite direction of the last two. FaZe are 1-3. They obviously were swept by the Ravens. Their one win coming against the Vegas Falcons today. Well, I'm recording this on Sunday. It's going to be uploaded on Sunday night, maybe Monday morning, depending on where you're at. But getting their first win versus Vegas, I guess, is a good thing to get under their belt, but they did lose a control versus Vegas, which is insane. They've been 100-point club twice already this season, which it's got to be like the most they've ever been 100-point clubbed in a year, and it's only 2 weeks in. They're 1-4 in search and destroy, and they're 1-3 in control, which has been two of their best modes, I feel like, most of the time in the CDL. They've always been able to rely on their SND and their control to help give them momentum if they're down early in a series, things like that. And obviously, you know, there is the whole thing of they got rid of Tupac, which was their SND coach. Some people say it doesn't really have an effect. Other people, like me personally, think it does. And I feel like it proves it with the fact that they are 1-4 in the first 5 SNDs they've played. And then on top of that, overall, I mean, individually, numbers-wise, like KD and that stuff isn't everything, but Stellium has a negative KD through the first 4 series. Stellium usually has the highest KD all season long. Draza's also negative. I believe Simp might be like even, and Abeezy's a little bit positive, or the other way around. But right now, just individually, they're not playing great. As a team, they're not really playing team COD. It doesn't feel like they're doing things together on the map. And you can tell the confidence has not been there when you look at their player cams and things. I think FaZe is in an interesting spot. Honestly, they got to win out probably if they want to make winners bracket, or at least win 2 of the next 4, or 2 of the next 3, sorry. And we're going to see what they do, man. But FaZe has been a massive surprise because I don't think anybody saw them starting this way. Our number 4 surprise is going to be a player, and that player is going to be Kicks from the Vegas Falcons. Obviously, Falcons are the worst team in the league. I don't think that's a harsh thing to say or a hot take. I definitely feel like they're probably the worst. They only have 2 map wins. They won an SND versus Ravens and a control today versus Atlanta FaZe. People were telling me in the offseason that Kicks is nice with it, that he looks good. I think Xdid got the most hype from this team coming into the year. This guy looks he looks incredible almost, to be fair. He is currently 3rd in overall KD in the entire league with a 1.19. He's been good in every single game mode. And the thing is, after their first week and I saw how good he was doing, I was like, I got to watch this guy a bit more because maybe he's playing slow and like baiting his teammates or like sitting on head glitches and playing more of the Cellium style that kind of leads to higher KDs. But nah, man, when you watch him play, this guy is getting in the mix. He's getting active. He's playing smart. I feel like he plays his life really well. If he gets weak, he doesn't ego chow. He definitely takes his gunfights and when he has advantages. Overall, this guy Kicks looks nasty. I think he's the rookie of the year right now, even though they don't have a win. Rookie of the year is more of an individual thing, in my opinion. That's at least my philosophy from watching the NBA. And I think this guy Kicks actually has potential to be picked up by another team if he ends up getting dropped or leaving Falcons, or even being built around going forward, depending on what the Falcons want to do with their roster. Moving on to number 5 for my 7 surprises, and this is going to be the Cloud9 ARs. I think C9 themselves have been a surprising team because obviously the first week they had server issues, didn't really count. This second week, they won their first match and they got reverse swept in their second one. But specifically, their ARs are the big surprise to me. What I do want to say is, first off, Sib is second to last in overall KD right now with a 0.73, and Attach is third to last with a 0.81. So right off the bat, they're getting slammed, and especially in Respawn, they're really not shooting back. Sib's not shooting back in any game mode, but Attach is at least doing pretty good in SND. But they are getting tucked in every single game. And the thing for me that makes this really surprising is in the offseason once we knew the C9 roster, the rumors at least, coming into the season, everybody, including myself, like I'm not trying to make myself sound like I knew what was going on. I too did not see this coming. everyone was saying that the C9 SMGs, Kremp and Mac, were going to be the X factor on this team. Like, we were all saying, if these guys aren't on point, they're going to get fried. Sib and Attach are the best AR duo you could have put together in Roster Mania. They could be one of the best AR duos outside the top 3 teams, competing with like Insight and Beans for that 4th best spot. We all thought that C9's ARs were going to be elite. Honestly, we all thought they were going to be in the upper echelon of ARs this season. And they're literally the worst AR duo. I don't think it's a hot take. I think they're the worst AR duo in the league right now because they have not looked good at just about anything other than Attach in a couple SNDs. It has been abysmal and quite surprising as to how bad they've looked. Kremp and Mac have actually looked pretty good. So if Sib and Attach start shooting back the way that we know they're capable of, they definitely are going to be a force to be reckoned with, this C9 team, especially because they're already pretty tough to play on a good server when they're not lagging, and their ARs aren't even really shooting back. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out going forward because they got a long break. I really am interested to see just how this break helps or hurts teams, right? For some teams, if you're down bad right now, I feel like this break can help you either get your mental right or it's going to make it worse. Because if you're really down bad and you don't even have another match to try and get yourself out of the gutter and sort of play your way, or you know what I'm saying? Like they say, like shooters shoot, like in the NBA, if you're shooting bad, just keep shooting until you start making them. So there's no matches for 3.5 weeks. So for some of these guys like Sib and Attach, I wonder how the break is going to help or hurt them going into next month, into next year, 2025. Number 6 on my list is another team, and this is the Los Angeles Gorilla Mates. I will say for LAG, an 0-4 star, a 6-12 map count looks pretty bad, but honestly, I feel like if you watch their maps, a lot of them are more winnable than they've been winning. Like this team genuinely could have multiple wins on the season, in my opinion. They've just trolled so many winning opportunities in so many different maps. I mean, looking on my second monitor at who they've played, they lost to Minnesota Rocker, Carolina Royal Ravens, LA Thieves, and OpTic Texas. So 4 teams that are probably in the top 6 right now in a lot of people's rankings and in the standings. Teams that are clearly pretty competitive. I mean, Rocker nearly took LAT to a game 5, potentially almost beat them today. Ravens obviously are undefeated. Thieves are undefeated, and OpTic are 3-1. Of course, 1 loss coming to Boston. So this LAG team is so close, I feel like, to getting it done. And one of the reasons this is a surprise is I feel like there had some expectations behind them because of the whole fan base coming in and Gentlemates being this big org, getting into the league. They signed a bunch of world champions with a young gun in Lins, but definitely I think the expectations were a bit high for them, and clearly they just haven't lived up to them yet. And then on top of that, Kismet's actually been playing relatively well. I think Kiz and Lins have looked like a pretty solid sub duo, honestly, if you ask me. Kismet is 11th in overall KD with a 1.09. He's been one of the best control players. Lins has been doing his thing, haven't been mapped and slaying, but this consistency from the ARs just haven't been there. Priest is sitting at a 0.89 KD right now, and Sky is at a 1. Both of them have had some maps where they fried, but they both, I would say, consistently have not been great. So LAG has definitely been surprising. But I will say on the bright side for them, for any LAG mate fans listening out there, you have had a relatively difficult schedule. And going into the end of the split, you're playing the New York C9. So you're playing Cloud9, Ultra, and Falcons. So at least one of those versus Falcons, I feel like should be winnable. But they definitely have a rough schedule in the first split. And then last but not least, my 7th surprise is all the second-year players, right? The rookies from last year. I've said this in multiple videos at this point. I feel like the rookies from last season didn't really get a lot of hype, right? Like, I think they all had moments, right? I think Gwyn had his moments. You know, Real had moments. Abuza had moments. But they look really, really good in this game. Gwyn looks MVP level. Lins has had some big moments. Real is honestly in contention for one of the best subs in the game right now, despite them losing. Snoopy has looked great. Purge has looked great. Geo and Estriel have had some big moments. Abuza's had moments. I believe he's the kill record leader right now for a map with like 45 or 46 kills. 04 has had moments, especially big SNDs. The sophomore class this year actually, I feel like, is exceeding the expectations and what we might have thought we were going to get from them after their rookie years. And that's been a really pleasant surprise because making a lasting, sustainable career in the CDL is pretty hard. I feel like a lot of times you'll see players either get bounced in and out of the league or like in the league for a couple years and then dropped out if you're not one of like the star talents. But I feel like some of these guys, or a lot of them, are proving that they could be like mainstays. Like they could really be building blocks for teams going forward into multiple years. Obviously, every year is a different COD game, so that can affect how people play. But generally speaking, I'm really impressed with the second-year sophomore players in this season so far. All right, now that we've talked about the 7 biggest surprises, I want to go on a little rant about the LA Thieves. If somehow, some way you couldn't tell or you don't already know, I am clearly an LA Thieves fan. And despite my team having this super team, being 4-0 to start, it has been a roller coaster of a first 2 weeks. The Thieves, as they have been dubbed in the past, the Heart Attack Thieves, truly are back and better than ever. I mean, this team has given me a heart attack multiple times watching them play so far this season. Now, like I said, they're 4-0, but the 4-0 has been a 3-1 to C9, a almost reverse sweep by FAZE, but we ended up closing it out 3-2. An LAG 3-1 that I don't even know if you watched the Game 4 Skyline Hardpoint in that series. Somehow, some way, we trolled at the end and then pulled it back out in literally the last millisecond of the game. And then 3-1 versus Rocker, which happened today, which, to be fair, really didn't feel that good because Rocker put up a really good fight. And we went down big in the SND. We lost 6-1. And then in the control, we went down 2-0 and were able to win 3 rounds straight. But Rocker played a really good series. And this LAT team just does not look decisive enough. We're not closing out leads. It's like we go up big and then all of a sudden the other team starts crawling back. And I think part of that is due in part to like, it's early in the game and the Thieves know they're really, really good. Like this team knows they're talented. So when they get up big and they're frying, I think they get a bit too confident. They start channeling a bit more than maybe they would or taking gunfights that maybe they shouldn't. And it slowly starts to spiral to where the other team can make a comeback. But what I will say on the bright side of LAT is clearly the composure is there, right? Like the regain is obviously there. When we go up big and then a team starts coming back, the boys are able to stay composed and lock back in and finish out a map, hence why they haven't lost yet. They are 4-0. So the fact that they're winning and learning, hopefully learning, right? I would imagine Shane and Troy are going to, Shane and Sender are going to make them learn what's going on. The fact that they're winning and learning rather than losing and learning is definitely a good thing because I'd rather be 4-0 and making mistakes that you can fix going forward than being 2-2 and being like, oh my God, look at the mistakes we're making and we're not winning. So I will say that's on the bright side. They definitely have been able to stay composed. And when they realize they're giving up a big lead, have either been able to lock back in and finish it off or regain in the next map if they do lose. We're 7-1 in Hardpoint, which is insane. It does not feel like it. The only loss coming in Game 4 versus FaZe. Like I said, it doesn't feel like it. When you watch some of these maps, I mean, a couple of them have been like absolute slammage, right? Like 100-point clubbing FaZe in map 1. Watching the way some of these maps play out, some of the leads that we take and then throw away, or going down big and then clawing back to end up getting a victory, it just hasn't been the cleanest Call of Duty. And as I am grateful they're 4-0, of course, I wish there was some cleaner COD going on. And the last part I want to talk about here for the Thieves is Hydra. Hydra is nasty. Hydra is a superstar. He's one of the best players in the game, but his search and destroy has been bad, bro. He's a 0.78 KD in SND. He's at 0.58 kills per round, which, I mean, is clearly not a lot of kills per round, right? I mean, he's not averaging nearly a kill per round. It's been pretty bad. And overall, as a whole, the team is just lacking first bloods. They're just not getting first bloods, I feel like. So it just feels like the SND specifically has not been great. The respawns are looking pretty solid, especially the hardpoint. But this team clearly has a lot to work on. So, I mean, my message really to non-LA Thieves fans is like, I want people to know, at least most Thieves fans that have, you know, eyes and are watching the matches like myself, I understand we're not unbeatable. Like, this Thieves team is not invincible. They're not going to win every single match all year. They clearly can be beaten. So for anyone out there that thinks Thieves fans are maybe getting cocky or like talking too much trash or too big for their boots so far, I want you to know that most Thieves fans understand, like, we're not unbeatable. This team does have flaws, but they also could get better throughout the season, which is something I'm obviously hoping happens. I also want to talk about OpTic because obviously I'm not going to touch on the whole Pred situation. We know there's rumors. We don't really know what's going on with Pred. I want to talk about OpTic with Huke, and I might make a dedicated video about this at some point in the next week or two because OpTic with Huke versus OpTic with Pred has honestly been a bit surprising in multiple different ways. We obviously saw the first week they played 2 matches with Pred. The second week they played 2 matches with Huke. So it's a fair, even comparison, right? 2 matches with each. So we get to kind of see what it's looked like. With Huke, they're 2-0. They went 6-3 in map count. Obviously with Pred, they did end up losing one of those series to the Boston Breach. But specifically with Huke, they're 3-0 in Search and Destroy. Without a doubt, better at SND with Huke than they are with Pred. I saw a clip that apparently Pred said, I think on like a SCUMP watch party, that he thinks they should be getting more SND reps. And clearly, I think he was right, because their SND was not as good with him as it is now with Huke. How much of that is due in part to Huke's presence on the team and not just them getting more reps? It's kind of hard to exactly say. I mean, I can pull up, I guess, how OpTic have looked, or like what Huke's stats essentially are in SND, if I pull this up real quick. In Search and Destroy, Huke is actually doing better. He's a 1.43 KD to Pred's 0.9. Their kills per round are pretty similar. They're both sitting in 0.77 for Huke, 0.73 for Pred. Pred does have more first bloods than Huke, which is interesting. But overall, I think Huke definitely has been a better SND player for them. And clearly their Search and Destroy has gotten better. But on the flip side of that coin, right, feels like there's a flip side to every coin. They've been worse in respawn. They were 2-1 in hardpoint and 2-0 in control, so a 4-1 respawn record with Pred. Now with Huke, they were 2-2 in hardpoint and 1-1 in control, so that is a 3-3 record. So clearly, they go from winning all but one respawn to a 50% win rate with Huke. You can see the difference and the fall off there in respawn. So yes, you get better at Search, which was OpTic's crutch all of last season, right? It was the thing that came to bite them in the ass a lot of the time. But you're getting worse in respawn. And, you know, they say SND wins championships, but respawn is 3 of the 5 maps in a series, right? There's 2 hardpoints and a control compared to 2 SNDs. So you probably want to be really good at respawn over really good at SND and bad at respawn, in my opinion, just because of the amount of maps in a series. So it's definitely interesting to see how they've shifted in terms of their playstyle. But another thing that I thought was weird, because we all know what's the word I'm looking for? We all know like the community sentiment around Huke and Pred and the way they play. We all think Huke is like this rapid, fast-paced, like go, no breaks, right? And we all think Pred is lazy, he lays down, he waits, he's a little bit slow sometimes. But looking strictly at the hardpoint and control engagements per 10 minutes for the first 2 series for each of these players, so the first 4 series in total, Huke is actually playing slower than Pred in the respawns. Feels like an alternate universe, because seriously, everyone thought Huke was this just absolute running gun. Sometimes he's in the blender, sometimes he's slamming, and Pred is laying in a corner somewhere doing... It's actually proven to be the opposite so far in the first 2 weeks of the season. So it's weird. OpTic's in an interesting place. They definitely got to continue to work at it with Huke. You also have to remember, going into week 1 with Pred, they've been playing together as a team for over a year. Going into week 2 with Huke, they've been playing together for 3 days, right? Obviously, Shotzi and Dashy have played with him in the past, but Kenny, you know, as this roster, they've been playing together for like a couple days. So there's definitely a gap in practice. So I really think this team could end up being good with Huke, like being still a top 3 team. To the people that are arguing, will they be better with Huke? Are they better with Pred? Only time will tell. If you go into this thinking they're going to be better with Huke than Pred, I feel like that's crazy, because they just won a championship with him. But I think the ceiling is there. They could for sure end up being better with Huke, but he's going to have to find his consistencies, because he had some big moments, but he was getting farmed in some of the respawns and things like that. So OpTic's in an interesting place. I know the whole thing with Pred is kind of crazy, and we don't really know what's happening, but on the bright side for OpTic, to be optimistic about it, your team is undefeated as your new roster, and you're looking pretty good and only going to get better as you get more practice. All right, now to get into the Ask Jake segment here at the end of the video, we're going to answer a few of the questions from last week. I got a bunch on the last week's video, so thank you to everyone who dropped a comment. If I don't answer yours from last week, you can drop it again on the comments down here. Or if you have a new question for me, feel free to drop it down below for next week's episode. But the first thing here comes from Gavin, and he says, what do you think the Falcons owners consider a successful COD season? Are they just trying to grow these Saudi players so that they can be the inspiration for new young Saudi COD players? Or are they trying to find which Saudi player they want to build around and then fill the rest of the roster with the best players they can get? Obviously, I have no connections with the Vegas Falcons or their ownership. I don't know what their real goal is. From my perspective and what I've gathered from watching as well as hearing the way the Falcons ownership talks, or their coaches and there's things like that talk on social media, it feels to me like their primary goal is to just shine a light on Middle Eastern esports, on the whole scene, and to grow that scene specifically. Obviously, we all know that region, some of these people have a lot of money, like the people who own the Vegas Falcons, And they're using that money to try and grow their scene, which I think is pretty cool. They could have came into the league and just been like, yo, we want Hydra and Scrap, and just snatched them up from LAT, because there's no way LAT was competing with the bag those guys could have offered. But they didn't do that. They stuck by, first of all, the Challengers team they've had for 2 years now. They've had these guys for a long time. I believe there was like one roster change in there, but had the core of this roster for a very long time. I think their goal is just primarily to put these guys in a league, show they can be competitive, and that they can win and take maps off of some of these top teams. And then also just inspire, like Gavin said in this question, inspire some of the other players from the region to grind and get their names out there and potentially get picked up to the Falcons, whether it be as a pro or a Challengers player going forward. Next up, we got a question here from Pren, who asked, in your opinion, what is the best part of competitive Call of Duty? This is a good question, right? Because obviously this is totally opinion based. Like, everyone's favorite part or best part of competitive COD is going to be different. For me, this is tough because I like a lot of things about competitive COD. Obviously, if I didn't, I probably wouldn't even be making this video. But I think for me, the number one thing is the storylines we get in COD. I feel like, one, we get a lot of like drama and we have a lot of personalities, which I think is just super dope and great for the scene as a whole. But the storylines every year are just super interesting, right? This year we have a top 3. Who's going to be the best? Who's going to come out on top? Who's going to win the most events? That's a big storyline. How good is this new LA Thieves super team going to be? Should they have, or should this team have signed with Genomates? Will this team end up being worth the money? That's another dope storyline. How will Atlanta FaZe bounce back after finishing top 6 at Champs, right? Obviously, they won EWC last year, but we know there were some internal differences going on after that Champs run. EWC kind of saved the roster. How will they bounce back after that? That's another storyline. I feel like there's so many different storylines and just interesting things that happen in the scene that put like an extra little thing on top of every match or on top of every stage that just make the stakes a little bit higher. And those things are truly like what makes it the most fun for me. Because it's like, okay, do I think like LA Thieves versus FaZe is fun? Of course, right? But the fact that they're top teams, the fact that they're 2 of the best, the fact that Scrap versus Draws, like all of those little things just add layers and layers onto how fun it is to watch the game. So for me, I think it's the storylines, but I mean, I could go on and on about the things I enjoy about our scene. Our last question here comes from my guy, Alex, and he asked, do you think Cloud9 made a mistake bringing in Mac? He said, I felt like he was getting slammed and looked lost on certain maps this past weekend. Obviously, this comment came after week 1, so kind of hard to, you didn't know what happened week 2. Mac actually looked really good this past weekend, which is part of my answer. Week 1, they also were lagging. They were playing on bad servers. At least that's what they said. And I trust accuracy and attach if they say that. Those aren't guys I feel like that'll complain for no reason. Personally, for me, I actually don't think they made a mistake. I talked about it earlier as one of my surprises. The SMGs, Kremp and Mac, have been the best players on this team. I actually think Mac has probably been their best player outside of this last series they played today versus the Royal Ravens. Even though they did lose, I thought Kremp was their best player in that series. So I don't actually think it was a mistake. I think it was shocking to me that he got picked up after not being in the game for over a year, but he clearly is still able to compete, has some insane maps, gets some high kill games, and overall, I think he's only going to get better as it goes on, right? So I don't think it was a mistake, right? Only time will tell, but as of right now, after week 2, I'm going to say, no, it's not a mistake bringing in Mac. But I think that is going to do it here for this episode of Champs Sunday with Jake Maverik. Like I said, drop questions down below for next week's Ask Jake segment. Let me know what you thought about the first 2 weeks of matches, though. We're going into a 3.5 week break. We have the minor tournament coming up right after the break, and then we go into more qualifiers and then the major. So we still got plenty of time before Major 1. I'm excited to see how these teams shake out going forward, because right now it looks very, very, very competitive amongst every team in the league. Honestly, not even just the middle of the pack. They all look super competitive with each other. So let me know what you think down below. Like I said, if you're not subbed to the channel, make sure to sub. We're going to see if we get 7K by 2025. It's going to be tough, but I think we could do it. And yeah, let me know what you think. If you're listening on Spotify, drop a 5-star review. If you're watching on here, drop a like. And hopefully I'll see you all in the next one.